Hello, today is June the 16th, 2021. And if you're here for how DocuSign scales content operations to pave the way for customer self-service with Dusty Clark and Deana Falk of DocuSign, you're in the right place. My name is Scott Abel, and I'll be the host of today's show. Let me tell you a few things about our platform. First, you don't have to worry about us accessing your camera or microphone. We cannot see or hear you as participants. Also, you can't have a two-way conversation with us, but what you can do is you can ask a question at any time using the Ask a Question tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that button will open a small text window, which will allow you to submit a question to us. We will not be able to respond in a text-based format to those questions, but I will queue up as many as possible and ask them of the presenters during today's show with the time allowed. Additionally, there won't be any polls today, so if you see a poll, that'll be a surprise to me and to you, so you don't have to worry about that. And we've provided some additional content in the attachments section of your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that button will open up a library of content that you can access, including links provided by the sponsors and content about and from the panelists on today's show. You can also find troubleshooting information in that same attachments section should you have trouble while you're on today's show. Also, at the end of today's program, I'll ask you to give feedback on a 1 through 5-star rating. You're rating the quality of the information provided by the panelists today, and 5 is the highest rating possible. There's a small field to allow you to type a comment in if you'd like to share the comments that you had about your feedback with the presenters, and I know they would appreciate it if you made a second to do that. So let's take a look at our presenters today. First, I'd like to welcome to our stage Megan Gilhooly from Zoomin Software. Megan, are you on the line?
I am here, Scott. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to drive these slides for you just to introduce your panelists and then let you take the show away from there. First, can you tell the audience members who might not be familiar with who you are and what you do, tell us a little bit about your connection to today's topic.
Yes, absolutely. So I am Vice President of Customer Experience at Zoomin. And Zoomin is a platform that ingests technical product content from any source, no matter how it was created or published. We deliver it into a doc portal, into a community, into your customer service site, and even into the product itself. So in that way, we help you present answers to your customers so that they can quickly and easily find the answers they need. And we are co-hosting this today with IXIASOFT. And unfortunately, excuse me, Caroline from IXIASOFT was not able to make it, but the DocuSign team, sorry for my voice, I'm just getting over being sick. The DocuSign team uses both IXIASOFT and Zoomin as part of their platform. And so we're very excited to have these folks from DocuSign come in. So I'll go ahead and introduce the presenters. So first of all, we have Dusty Clark. Dusty is the Senior Manager of Content Operations at DocuSign. Hey, Dusty, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. And also with Dusty, we have Deana Falk, Senior Information Architect at DocuSign. Welcome, Dina. How are you?
I'm doing good, Megan. Thanks for having us.
Great. So we're going to move right into it. I will be here to ask some questions and to kind of keep things moving along. But if I have a coughing fit, I apologize in advance. My voice sounds a little off. I've been sick in bed for 2 days, so here I am. Anyway, with that, why don't we go ahead and take it away, Dusty?
Great. Thank you. So welcome. Thank you all for joining. Today we'll be talking about how we add to the conversation around information experience here at DocuSign and how establishing content foundations has helped us scale. We'll cover how we approach content operations, what are the crucial elements for success, and where we are in that journey. So first up, this old house. This is a theme that you'll kind of see running through this presentation. So we started a couple years back with a fairly common problem. There was a lot of product content being created, user guides, quick start guides, release notes, so on. But as DocuSign grew and made acquisitions, more and more content started to appear with its own set of requirements and new problems as well. So we were kind of left with this mishmash of standards and varying levels of content definitions and any number of release cadences. And source content itself might end up being Word or HTML or PowerPoint or maybe even something entirely different. We had some methods for publishing content, but ultimately it was an inherited publishing system that required manual handoffs and significant time waiting around for server pushes. And those are really just the back end pieces. By the time content reached the customer, we were also up against this sense of disconnect with no real path for the customer to navigate content or a good connected way to move from one topic to another. So in order to start building toward an enterprise content experience, we needed to look at the entire journey and start connecting the dots. So how we author content and the experience we provide to authors, how we publish and use metadata to support automation and personalization, and then through to the display side and how customers can better find content and self-serve those needs. So, there's a lot of complexity between, these categories of create, publish, and display. But I think foundationally what we want to do is try to establish early on where we want to go and what things are going to be important for us.
Okay, as for the goals, as we started thinking about those foundational elements, we wanted to think about the experiences, the full content experience, starting with our author experience all the way through to our customer experience. Also looking at some of the problems that we were very much aware of around findability and discoverability of our content, as well as, the goal of always getting to that key personalization via content profiles. We're also looking into other channels to deliver our content. Up to this point, we've been delivering most of our product documentation to our support center. And we're looking to expand that to deliver that content in product experience. Next slide.
So a foundational blueprint. The crux of operationalizing is what we're doing in the space between the tools ecosystem and the content strategy. It's not the tools alone that are going to make or break success. It's kind of that interplay between the people and the processes and the systems. So we'll spend a little time going through each of those areas in a little more depth.
Looks like Caroline was able to join us.
Welcome, Caroline. So people, the core delivering a better content experience is having the right crew. Sometimes that means you might have to beg, borrow, or steal for some of these roles. But I think the caveat here is that it's possible for one person to fulfill more than one of these roles. So for example, an information architect may also be part researcher or designer, or maybe even possibly part tools specialist. We tend to have a few IAs who fall into this category. So kind of the flavored IAs or information architects with a specific flavor or focus. And generally this kind of spread has made sense for our organization. So we began with kind of three key roles to start our journey into operationalizing. For us, it was an IA for content structure. So that's really around standards and terminology. And we've also since added a search strategy to that list. The tool specialist to help us guide us into structured authoring. And then the ops evangelist to help us connect and align operations cross-functionally and engage with teams for more buy-in. I would put data scientist, designer, and researcher under nice to haves, as in terms of like a dedicated role. Those are more often, in our experience, roles that you may get loaned part-time or contract out for if necessary. The librarian role here is probably the haziest, but that's intended to be your content manager, the person grooming your metadata, and the person who's keeping the pulse on publishing. And we're by no means, fully staffed out across this for roles, but I think in terms of the longer vision of where we'd like to head, this is kind of the core group that we would see, or want to see inside of our content ops organization.
And just like the people, we're early in that kind of implementation as it relates to our content operations. We're also kind of early in figuring out and defining the processes and governance around content publishing, content systems. But we do have some kind of core ideas that we are thinking about. Consistency. We believe that creating a landscape where content is consistent, with documented standards, consistent language, consistent metadata, taxonomies, aligned content structures and formats, is a key pillar for us for defining those processes. We're currently kind of capturing our key content types across all of our content development teams. Right now, our team is primarily focused on the product side of the business, but we have content creators at DocuSign, from marketing all the way through to the customer success organization. So kind of defining what those key content types across the development teams helps us understand the overall content ecosystem. When we are thinking about processes, I think we not only think about efficiency, right, around, author's effort to publish, but it should also be effective, right? So executing the right processes and achieving the desired goals in the most efficient way possible. And then lastly, as we stated, we're scaling, we have to scale our content operations to be flexible for both our business as we acquire new businesses or our customers evolve.
And the third bucket for us is systems. We prioritize our systems with a long-term customer vision in mind. So before we're able to get to things like context sensitive and product help, we needed to first have a scalable authoring infrastructure in place. We chose data implementation with IXIASOFT CCMS. And this is really where, we mentioned on the people slide that we would start with a tools specialist. And we started with that because, moving to something like structured authoring is certainly a heavy lift and you want to have the expertise to do that. Our next step was the Zoomin publishing platform to help aggregate content, consume that metadata, and enable us to deliver it how and where we need it. Those pieces together will help us and allow us to create that more personalized, on-time customer experience. It also leaves us the flexibility to use an alternate display platform, or to modify content to be delivered in something outside of our current display platform when necessary.
Next step, we have what we call our home inspection, right? We need to validate these content experiences, looking at those systems that we just discussed. We wanted to validate to ensure that the foundations we were building truly improves the overall content experiences for both our authors and our customers. So we looked at some KPIs we could track for both those experiences. We focused on average publishing time for our author experience and a usability score for our customer experience. On that previous slide, sorry, you'll note that on the left was our IXIASOFT web authoring experience. on the right is a screenshot of a Zoomin portal, a documentation content portal experience. Let's dig into what we learned. For the authoring experience, using IXIASOFT and Zoomin, we were able to reduce the average publishing time drastically, from approximately 1.5 hours to publish a single publication to just 5 minutes. How's that for effective efficiency? For testing the customer experience, we decided to create a proof of concept site using Zoomin's documentation portal. This portal allowed us to expose publications' table of contents, which was not available in the flat architecture of our existing support center. Once the proof of concept site was created, we executed an unmoderated usability test with approximately 30 customers. They were given a single task to locate a specific topic on both our existing support center as well as the Zoomin documentation portal. The results were clear. A single task that took approximately 2 minutes on our existing support center only took 55 seconds on the Zoomin documentation portal. So we're reducing our customers' friction and allowing them to locate and find and discover our content quickly. And lastly, a system usability scale showed significant increase in overall usability score. Our support center was ranking at 76, while our proof of concept Zoomin documentation portal ranked at a 90 with those same customers.
Dina, can you talk a little bit more about what that system usability score is?
Sure. System usability score is really a ranking of how usable our customers perceive a site or system to be. And so in our particular case, we were testing specifically, again, navigating the content experience with a specific task. And then we asked the customers a list of standardized questions to kind of gain the score around how usable they believe the system to be.
Got it. And it's 0 to 100, with 100 being the highest. Is that right?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
So continuing renovations. This is a little self-reflection on where we are with our maturity level in content ops. We're past the chaos, we're on the cusp of a centralized strategy. We're leaning more into aligning taxonomy and metadata across the enterprise. And we're putting the thought work into how we get the right kind of data to drive more of the content experience. This is where you could really manifest that unified vision and start pulling in other content creating teams into your ecosystems and processes. Those are some of the larger next step items for us, is how we can better replicate the progress we've already made, share what we've learned, and start pulling in other teams into our systems and ecosystems and process implementations to kind of better support what they're doing, and keep driving towards that. I mentioned the unified or the shared vision. Keep driving for that larger shared DocuSign content vision. So our future investments, are really going to be around growing those operational roles. So we've got a matrix of roles we think we need, roles that are in some instances, those part-time kinds of roles, or roles that are a little bit more fluid. But how can we staff those to meet the need as we start operationalizing, and as we start establishing new areas? One good example would be like the librarian role, something that didn't exist before, but because we're doing operational work, we now have a new need. So preparing for what that will look like, and then depending on other content teams that we're working with, how do we support those teams? The other big ticket item is going to be getting alignment across the taxonomy. I mean, across the organization with our taxonomy. So, as we start growing our metadata footprint, and as we really use metadata to drive what we're doing with publications, how we're optimizing our search, we need that to align across systems and across other teams in the organization. So we want to find those teams that are, already have some implementations of taxonomy, and we want to just make sure that what we're doing aligns with what they're doing, and we're sharing that across our systems. And then we have a growing need to automate some of at least the parts that are automatable, some of the QA rules that we need. In one sense, to establish those standards across the board of these are the guidelines that we want to put out there, but in another sense also so that we can start pulling more content health metrics out of our system. So one of the advantages of moving to structured authoring is having access to those health metrics in your content, and then being able to tie those metrics back to some of the newer metrics that are now available on the other side of the content pipeline. So how can we look at things we're doing on the authoring creation side that are impacting the customer's experience, or how well a customer is able to interact or engage with a piece of content, how we can then start altering how we're authoring content after coordinating those metrics across the system. Thank you.
Great, that was awesome. So we have some questions coming in. I have a few of my own, and I just wanted to introduce everyone to Caroline. Caroline Couvrette is here from IXIASOFT. She's the VP of Sales. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. All right. Again, sorry for the coughing. I've got some really good questions here. So my first question is for Dina. So Dina, you had talked about adding consistency across all of your content. Can you dive a little deeper into how you did that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a completed process, right? It's an ongoing a process for us. But I think the place that we started first was kind of truly defining. We had brand standards and copy standards at the enterprise level, right? That kind of guided the entire company around brand. But what we didn't have was a technical style guide where there's different needs for, I think, the folks that are producing kind of the post-sales documentation, the technical communications. And so we got a team together to cross-functional team to come together and define kind of these content standards in our tech style guide, we called it. So that was one of the key things. The other things is kind of aligning on the content types that we're delivering. There's little alignment there, within each silo, with each team, kind of there's an agreed upon set of content types. For our team in particular, the information experience team delivering our product documentation, we're very focused on user guides, admin guides, release notes, and certain content types. But as you expand out into our support organization, they have specific content types that they need to deliver, and getting those standardized around troubleshooting, FAQs, the types of content that would come out of the customer success or the folks that are frontline. So just kind of a lot of meetings, a lot of kind of cross collaborations. I think one of the greatest things is that we created was kind of this grassroots content group in Slack. We called it Cross Team Content Channel. And we've got everyone in there from, internal to external content creators, kind of discussing problems or issues that we have. And then it's just this kind of grassroots place to kind of start creating that consistency where we know there are differences.
I love that. That's awesome. Were you able to get people to engage in that channel pretty quickly?
Yeah, it's quite surprising. At first, when I first thought about this channel, I was like, let's just get people together and talking, right? Like Slack's a great way to do that. And what I initially thought about it was like, well, let's just share what great new content you're producing, right? And so other content creators can pick up on that. It's a nice handoff process, right? That was a little less successful. Like people are just not going in there and consistently doing that. What is happening though is this kind of this cross-pollination where a lot of folks are kind of finding those quality issues or, broken links or, sharing information about big content initiatives that might be going on in their team. And it's just kind of opened that up in a grassroots way without any real formal, content strategy group or anything like that. So that was our first step. And I think that's where I would say we are at this point as far as enterprise-wide kind of standards and consistency.
Dina, you mentioned that the author experience was important to you. It was one of the first building blocks, I think, that you show on the screen. And as a publisher of a book about the author experience, because we recognized that that was important, what led you to that recognition? Because this is not something that shows up on most slides. Most slides assume the authors are doing whatever they do, and magically there's content. And then we do all this stuff. And if you look at the graphics, it's like content, system, delivery. And it's like, well, wait a minute, there's people doing the authoring.
Yeah.
What did you learn about that? And why was that so critical to put into place in the beginning?
Yeah, I think Dusty can speak to this quite a bit too,
Awesome.
coming on, and looking at the systems. He was very much involved in that. So Dusty, do you have some insight that you want to share there?
Yeah, I mean, our authors are our internal customers, and we want to make sure that as authors kind of start going down this road of let's say that as you operationalize and as you move to more of a structured authoring environment, you're adding a layer of complexity just to the basic authoring principles, right? I mean, ideally, we're separating format from taking it out of the equation so that authors can focus on just semantic tagging and focus on the actual authoring itself. But I think there's still kind of that layer of additional process, right? In moving to more of a scalable system. And so I think because of that, we want to really be mindful of the author's experience and how they're creating content. So it's not starting to get in the way of them creating the content, right? It's not becoming an obstacle or it's not becoming a pain point for them, and they can focus purely on the writing. I'd like to think, or I'd like to say that, we want to get technical writers spending as much time as possible writing content, because at the end of the day, the industry, there's so many other things that a writer has to do that, it's eating into what the idea of a technical writer is. And so, we want to get it back to that more pure form of writing.
Yeah, this is so true. I actually developed a 2x2 model where I pitted author experience on one end against the customer experience on the other. And so it creates these 4 quadrants. And there's this one quadrant where the company is focused really highly on customer experience, but they're not at all focused on author experience. And the idea that anyone can stay in that quadrant is just I called it the imaginary kingdom in that quadrant, because it just can't exist for that long, because you can focus on customer experience individually, but if your authors are not happy, they're not creating the best content for your customers. And so you're going to slide back into this area where you are not focused on customer experience or author experience, or you have to start focusing on author experience to kind of bump up into the right. So really interesting discussion. I love that.
I have a question for Dusty too, that might help some of the members of our audience that are not involved in the content industry in the way that Megan and I are, for example. Dusty, some of our viewers wonder, what do you mean when you say content operations, and how does a technical communicator need to think about that? Why is that important for them to know?
Yeah. So, I think there was a slide that kind of got to this, where I was breaking down what content operations really means. And it's kind of that, it's that space sitting in between the systems that we put in place and the content strategy that's out there, right? So there's a lot of doing, a lot of process, a lot of people, and a lot of systems that have to come together to make a efficient, well-moving piece of operationalized functionality where content can flow from authoring all the way through to the published and the experiential side. where where we're not sitting in I guess like a siloed state where we all have come together on the same set of guidelines and standards, and where we all understand how we go about creating these pieces of content. It's very clear what kinds of content are being created. It's very clear how they get from point A to point B and how these workflows are in place. So it's one element of connecting these systems. It's one element of connecting these people along with the standards and guidelines they need to move through these systems. And then it's one part ensuring that there's efficient processes to adequately support that workflow.
Would it be fair to say that you're setting up a content factory?
Mhm.
It seems like all the ingredients are
I think so. Yeah.
Components, standards, automation, process, governance. It's the same thing if you're making a car, right? As if you're making the information about the car.
Yes, this is the Ford factory of content. Yeah.
Did your job come about? Did somebody say we need somebody to be in charge of content operations, or did you somehow push your way in there? How did this role become a thing in your company?
Yeah, so I think for DocuSign it stemmed from an initial need of there was at least enough vision on the information experience team from our leadership that they knew that we were going to be entering a place where we needed to be able to scale how to author content. And I think from a higher level, meaning from a looking up or from a leadership level, scale is a super just important concept. Especially for a growing company. So, as we're in a mode of making acquisitions and growing our content footprint, there was definitely kind of this organic or inherent need of how are we going to make sure that as this grows, we're feeding the content side along with it. So, I think, from my perspective, kudos for DocuSign for kind of having that sort of vision in place and being open to that. So instead of it being a situation, where a lot of times it's a lot of effort to pitch something like moving to structured authoring, we didn't have to go through excessive pitching or excessive friction to get there. Instead, I think it kind of made sense and people were open to what do we really need to do to scale? And let's lean on content, leadership from out in the world. Like let's hire good people who are good content people, and let's lean on their leadership for what we need.
That's a nice place to be in.
Yeah. So we're getting a lot of questions here about specific tools. So I think the biggest questions are, why are you using Zoomin and Adobe? Are you using Adobe Experience Manager?
No, we're not using Adobe.
Okay. I was confused by that too, but like 5 people have asked it. So I think because you put Experience Cloud, they assumed it was Adobe Experience Manager. But so you're not using Adobe. Zoomin is your primary. Okay, good. That takes like 4 questions.
Yeah, we got them out of the way.
So we'll need to update that slide if we do this again. And then Caroline, do you want to take do you have a question specifically from you, or do you want to take one from the audience? Oh, you're on mute.
I believe you're on mute.
You have to go to the top of the screen, the little microphone.
All right, let's see if I can help her while she's doing that.
Okay, you can just type questions to me and I'll ask the questions. All right. So, that one. Yeah, that one's about Adobe. There must be an Adobe person that's listening. They're like, I'm like, you're talking about Adobe.
I see too about the Adobe XML plugin, which my understanding is that plugin it's still fairly new, right? It's still within maybe 5 years.
Before you belabor that, I apologize for interrupting. Nobody else can see that, so we need to read the question aloud if you're going to answer it, so people will know what it is you're talking about. Only we can see the chat room.
Yeah.
So which one was it, Dusty, that you were talking about?
I see a lot of questions there. Curious why DocuSign chose IXIASOFT and Zoomin instead of Adobe Experience Cloud plugins. Yeah. With the assets that did XML, and what's missing from Adobe or those plugins. So I'm probably not qualified to say what Adobe XML is up to. But I do know that it's a newer product, although I know Adobe's been investing heavily in it. So it's just something we haven't assessed.
Megan, here's a question for you. What if the organization that one of our viewers works for isn't using Dina to support its content creation, to create all the content that it needs, are there other ways they can still get to the same destination with their unstructured content?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that we do. So we feel very lucky when we work with folks like IXIASOFT, because we know that the content coming in is highly structured, meaning it's going to lay out. So it's well worth the expense to get it structured. But if you don't have structured content, Zoomin can ingest HTML content directly, PDF content. We can kind of ingest whatever it is. And then there's just a little more work for you on the back end, because at some point you have to determine the taxonomy. You have to have some metadata strategy. If that's already been done, then you're ahead of the game. But we can certainly handle it if it's unstructured as well.
Excellent. And Caroline, can we hear you now? No, we can't.
Oh, you're very quiet.
Sorry. I apologize.
That's okay. Just type your questions to us in the chat and we'll ask them.
Looking back, this was for Dina and Dustin. Looking back, if there was one thing that you could have done different, either individually or as a team on this project, what would you have done differently? Dina, do you want to start?
Oh boy, these are tough ones.
Just one thing, not a whole bunch of things.
I learned from my mistakes, so there is no going back.
That's a good thing.
I'm trying to think of something as it relates to this this talk here. Dusty, do you have something on top of your head that you can think of that's different?
Yeah. So we made a fairly quick move to structured authoring. So we moved the team from a non-DITA house to being a DITA house in a very short time frame. I want to say it was 6 months or less. I may have extended that time frame out a bit, and particularly around prepping authors for the move, and especially authors who maybe have never worked in a structured authoring environment before, prepping them for what those changes would be. So I would just slow down timelines and take more time to get there. I mean, the problem in business is you don't always have that luxury to do that. But in an ideal world, I'd probably elongate it a little bit.
That brings up one for me too, is having kind of some level of those standards available at the time, we're going to that tool, because it felt like it created a little more, that framework, because it just created a little more more questions than answers. So having a little more of our standards and processes defined and shared out to those authors, I think would have been ideal, and that goes along with his time. The luxury of time.
Yeah.
What kinds of content is DocuSign trying to personalize, and what kinds of personalizations are you using? I think this question is getting at whether it's based on the product or the role or access of some kind that you've defined. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm not sure which one of you would like to volunteer that, but.
Do you want me to take it, Dusty?
Go for it.
Okay.
All right.
So again, we scaled from a single focused, product to a multi-product space. And so we have to migrate our content experiences to support multi-product, for one. The other thing, we're segmenting by roles primarily. We're not doing that too terribly deeply, but things around the standard user, the administrative experience, whether or not you're a developer or partner, thinking about those audience types, I guess. And where I feel like I'm seeing, and partly learned through our cross-team content channel, and just where it feels like our content is organically going as we scale, is really around that industry focus. So I think that's the biggest opportunity for us at DocuSign and our content strategy, is that extra step, that extra personalization element that is unique to the business problems of each industry that we're serving.
Excellent. Good answer. Megan, you want to tackle one or two of the other questions in the chat room here?
Yes. So somebody wants to know if you would equate a content engineer to a tool specialist. And if not, how do you envision the role of a content engineer in a content services organization model? And this is from Teresa, and I think I know which Teresa it might be based on the question. I might not, but.
I've seen content engineer descriptions that kind of I would also classify as a tool specialist, and vice versa. I mean, I don't like to give this answer, but probably depends. But yeah, I think so. I think that
Yay!
depending on where
Every
you're
show, every show, somebody
got to do it. Got to do it.
Yep, we have to have an it depends. Nice.
But it depends is a fair answer if you think about it, right? Because we have all these moving parts and these variables in our content production, and we can't have a standardized way of doing it that fits every single environment. We have to be able to specialize for our individual needs. So it seems like the approach that you're setting up is preparing you for the ability to make swift changes in the future and adapt your content when things around you change.
So Caroline had a few questions.
Oh, excellent. Go, Caroline.
And I'm going to be her voice, which is sort of ironic given the fact that I barely have a voice, but we're going to go with it. So in regards to the authors, I was wondering how your authors embrace DITA and the change that comes along with it.
Good question.
I'll start with that one, Dina. So at DocuSign, I think we actually took to DITA fairly well. I've had other previous experiences where it's been a rocky move, or there was a lot more resistance. Of course, there's always some resistance to change, or there's always some struggles when your whole world on a day-to-day how you interact with content is going to change. But at DocuSign, it was very positive. We had a very engaging set of authors, I think, who were hungry for for more process, I think, and for a little more standardization around what we're doing. I think that's always a key part of it, is selling why that change is necessary and what the benefits are going to be from moving to like a DITA or topic-based approach to authoring. And usually when you frame it up and give like those clear benefits, it could draw a direct line to what those are going to be on the other side. I think it always eases that transition.
Dusty, did your team get structured authoring training to make sure that they were successful? Some companies skip that step. I'm just curious if DocuSign did or didn't. We
did, yes. We did provide some training via IXIASOFT to get there. And then I think too that training is it's an ongoing learning process too, especially right if you're onboarding new team members as well. You can't always restart and do a full hands-on training. So there needs to be some level of online resource or some kind of resource that you can kind of give to your team moving forward as well.
One thing I would say about your team in particular, because I was lucky enough to be able to sort of watch this from beginning to, it's not like it's the end, but to today. And there are a couple things about your team that I noticed that sort of stands out from a lot of the teams that I've worked with. And one is the diligence and preparation. I mean, you guys checked every box as you went through, but you didn't do it in a way that slowed you down too much, right? Like you kind of slowed down to speed up, kind of getting at what you were talking about, Dusty. So you were just slow enough to make sure you didn't miss the big things like training, but you did really push and keep plowing through. And the other thing is, I love the sort of innovative thinking that your team has. You seem to be very open to diving in and trying. And if it didn't work, we could pivot very quickly, right? So I really appreciated that about your team. So I think that has a lot to do with the success as well.
Yeah, and I'd probably attribute some of that hands-on kind of curiosity. I mean, I think that's just like a cultural thing at DocuSign. I see that a lot, and I think it's a really positive quality.
Awesome.
There's another question from the audience. It says that you appear to have several content centers, maybe customers, developers, and others. Is it the goal to create consistency in style and content management across all of those content repositories? That's the first part of the question. That seems like a yes answer, but but you tell me, is that the goal?
Yeah, and I think the goal too is like at the end when we're kind of the end of the presentation when we're kind of pointing to where we want to go next. I think we're moving towards a model now of how can we support other content creating teams and tie into how we're creating content, what we're doing, how we're operationalizing content. We want to tie into those systems from other teams as well, so we can start giving back and adding to that service that we've created.
That's a fair answer.
Nice. And somebody also asked, as well as Caroline asked, about localization. So how much localization do you guys do? And how did bringing IXIASOFT and Zoomin in help to create more maturity around your localization process?
Yeah, we do a fair bit of localization. I think Dina can probably speak a little more to what languages or how large some of our content is. But we localize content depending on what content it is. Let me frame it this way: not everything across the board is localized to every language we have, right? So some content's not localized at all. Some content's localized to a small subset of languages. Some content is localized to a larger piece of languages. So for pieces that are built into this, operationalized content set that we're kind of going through here, those, we want to make sure that we're plugging into the localization team's tool sets. So when we say like we're aligning processes and workflows across teams, and that's part of operationalizing content, absolutely, localization is a huge part of the conversation. And in fact, right, it's such an exponential add-on to the quantity of content that we're talking about that, anything we do, I think you've got to have that localization buy-in, because whatever they're doing, the systems they end up with and the process they end up with is really inherently tied to the processes, that you're going to be setting up. So I think that's key in one aspect. And the other part of the question, I think, Caroline, you asked about how are we tying it in with our systems. We do localize content directly from IXIASOFT, push it into the localization team system, and pull it back out. And so we're using the functionality in IXIASOFT to localize content. But not everything we have and not everything we create is localized. So I think on our roadmap is how can we better enable that and kind of take advantage of some of the workflows we have for localization, so that we don't have this this varied or disparate kind of process workflow depending on content type.
Are you producing any video content to go along with your textual assets?
We do. Dina, do you want to talk about some video content?
Yeah, most of our video content is coming out of one of two sources. Our marketing team obviously is producing, kind of some of our marketing videos and assets. And then on the customer success side, we have a team, DocuSign University, that's kind of dedicated to on-demand learning and in-person learning. They're producing most of our video content that we are producing as part of the kind of post-sales side of the business. And that is hosted and delivered through our current experience, which is and not tied to Zoomin yet or IXIASOFT in any way.
Okay, great. Megan, do you have any other questions before we end up the show?
Yes, I do. So I love the home reno metaphors that you guys used. We do a lot of home renos because that's what my husband does for a living. So I actually just wrote a LinkedIn article last week about how ridiculous it sounds to count the wires in your ceiling to determine whether or not your electricity is on, right? Like it's just one of those things that would be a heavy lift and would be a completely useless number. You don't care how many wires you have. And I find that happens in business a lot, where we start to count things and then you look at it and you go, but what does it matter, right? So you talked a little bit about KPIs. I know that you're using Zoomin Analytics, but what kinds of KPIs do you think are really worth tracking? And are any of those that are sort of akin to counting the wires in your ceiling?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot. Like I'm really into in the content space, really around the content tracking. And I'm thinking about it in two ways. I'm thinking about the source level content and content health or quality assurance that could happen at the source, right? In our systems. Can we validate before we publish that we have healthy content that meets our standards and guidelines? And so we're focused on that, how we can do that within our systems like IXIASOFT. How can we validate that the content that we're producing meets those guidelines? Then there's the other side of it, is how are our customers consuming this, right? How do we go and target our content strategy? Where do we focus our efforts? And a lot of that is, I've been thinking about this concept of a content health score, and really kind of a lot of my thinking has come out of those dashboards that I've seen in Zoomin. There's one in particular analytics dashboard where it's the page views by the age of the content, right? And if you take that and put it into, take those publications and put them into a scatter plot, put a quadrant on it, each quadrant could have, an actionable item that you can go do. You can say this, highly valuable, fresh content should be sent for localization. Anything in the other quadrants shouldn't. But you can build an entire content strategy around something as simple as those two pieces of data. I obviously want to get more data than that and kind of build into something called the content health score, which would bring other metrics like actual user feedback, whether they thumbs up, provide comments, share it, download it, all of those behavior things too, is how are customers engaging? Is it healthy?
That's awesome. Yeah, that freshness popularity matrix is definitely a popular one. And I love the content health score. Being in customer experience, I talk a lot about the customer health score, but the content health score is really interesting. So we'll put you together with our analytics guru and make sure we get that done for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say I love that you included the sort of standards metrics as well as the post-production metrics. And I have a flywheel that I built where one sort of leads to the other, right? You have your assumptions that you've put into your style guide and your content model and whatever it is, you're feeding that in. And then you have hopefully a tool that will tell you how closely your content is aligning to that style. But then you have to go further than that because you don't know yet if your original assumptions were right until you see the post-production. And when you can line up the post-production next to, let's say your score, your content gets a score of 90 out of 100 versus 40 out of 100, is the 90 actually leading to your outcomes more than the 40? And if it's not, then you have a problem with your assumptions. Then you have to go back to your content strategy. So I really, really like how you sort of put that together. And I'm happy to share that flywheel with you.
Awesome. That'd be great.
Yeah. Excellent.
Excellent. We have time for one more question if you've got one hidden in there.
I mean, I have a whole list of questions here, but was there any from the audience? No? Okay. So my last question then is, you guys have done a tremendous job of sort of pulling together all of these teams. And I think part of it might be because of that culture that you mentioned, right? But are there specific things that you did to really pull in the other teams and get buy-in across all of the teams?
I think our pilot, I would say that, just kind of showing, right? Like showing them what we could do, just showing our authors how quickly they could publish into from IXIASOFT into Zoomin, that just blew their minds. And they're like, okay, we're all on board for this stuff. So just kind of, if there's a lightweight way to kind of show the direction you're going, I think that helps with buy-in. And gets people aboard real quick. And then on the other side of it, we were able to do that early sus testing, right? We had a localized site that we had a business use case for, but we also did some user testing on it to validate that, delivering with a full table of contents is a better experience for our customers. We were able to validate there. And so just showing that to our customers and internally kind of like validates all of our plans going forward. And helps everybody come along.
Yeah,
Nice.
And then having that longer term strategy and sharing that longer term strategy of, this is not, here's one step you want to get there. Here's the one step, the next step after, and then the following step, and showing, holistically, this is where we want to go in X amount of time, I think really helps get that buy-in.
Also transparency, right? Like there's going to be pain points. Like just be straight up honest. Don't try to pull the wool over the eyes. Like let everybody know that some of these, points in the process are going to be quite painful. And I think we did a good job of that, kind of setting that up with those that we were forcing through, some harder migration.
So you set the right expectations. Good.
And that's good.
Lovely.
You're going to herd cats. You need the cats to be on the same team as you.
Caroline says thank you very much, and she apologizes for the tech difficulties. Caroline, we're sorry that we had the tech, but we're glad that we can see your smiling face. So thank you for joining.
And thanks, Dusty and Dina and Megan and Caroline, as previously mentioned, for being here on the show and sharing what you can. There's so much around this subject. I'm sure that Megan and I will have more conversations with you and other people about what we've learned and how we mature these ideas around content operations in the future. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, which is Zoomin Software. Zoomin transforms technical product content into dynamic and intuitive experiences so that people can find the answers they need to use your product or service to its fullest. Zoomin's got a cloud-based solution that allows you to streamline content operations and gain powerful analytics so you can refine your content strategy and improve customer self-service. And if you'd like to learn more about what Zoomin offers, you can visit them on the web at zoominsoftware.com, or you can check the attachments section of your webinar viewing panel for contact information and some additional materials provided by the software company known as Zoomin. All right, so thanks to Zoomin for being our sponsor today. I want to tell you about a few shows that are coming up. First of all, July 15th, Amber Swope. If you are a data person or information architect, you're going to want to attend this show. It's about developing information architect in an agile environment. Amber's going to talk to us about how to get it right, especially if you're on an agile content team. And we have Andrea Ames, who's kind of an executive whisperer. She's a former technical communicator, now turned coach, who can talk to us about aligning what we need, our ask, right, with the executives that we're trying to tap, their priorities. So attend this show to learn how to get what you want when your content team needs something, especially money or other resources. August 11th, we're going to be talking about the need for science-based instructional design. This will be a super science content geeky show with Tina Kister on how we can make science-based content decisions. And August 26th, we're going to have information architecture guru Abby Couvrette talk about how information architecture can help us make sense of anything. Lots of great shows coming up. I appreciate your time today, and thank you for being here. I'm Scott Abel, a content wrangler, and I would like to encourage you to leave a review using the Rate This tab underneath your webinar viewing panel, letting the panelists know today what you thought of their quality of their presentation materials and the information they shared with you on a 1 through 5 star rating, with 5 being the highest rating. And don't forget to check out the attachments section where you can download information about all of our presenters and their contact information in case you'd like to reach out to them later or learn more about the companies that they work for. You've been watching How DocuSign Scales Content Operations to Pave the Way for Customer Self-Service, brought to you by DocuSign, IXIASOFT, and Zoomin Software. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time today. Be well. Keep doing good work. Bye-bye.